It's Wednesday, July 2nd. This is CTV at 6. Here's what's making news tonight. A maritime man who murdered his mother could get parole in just a few years. Sydney loses flights to Halifax just months after they were launched.
An extended heat warning stays in effect for parts of the Maritimes overnight and into Thursday.
Live from our Maritimes News Center, this is CTV News at 6. Here is Todd Battis.
Good evening. A Halifax man who murdered his mother in what has been called a fit of rage has been sentenced to life in prison, but will be able to apply for parole in about 9 years' time. Today, the judge says he committed the crime because he was going to be kicked out of his house, and he called the attack explosive, bizarre, and cruel. CTV's Callum Smith has the details, some of which are graphic.
71-year-old Delina Lana Pinsky was killed in her Halifax home on October 1st last year. Her body wasn't found until October 10th, when police conducted a wellness check on her 41-year-old son, who didn't show up to work October 2nd and hadn't been heard from since.
He had basically punched the victim multiple times and then ultimately stabbed her, which caused her death.
Jonathan William Pinsky was arrested the next day and ultimately charged with second-degree murder. The final straw in the strained relationship between the pair was when she yelled for him to turn on subtitles on her DVD. She told him he had to be out of the condo that night for good. According to an agreed statement of facts, he placed his mother in the closet after the assault, stabbed her in the neck, attempted to smother her with pillows, and covered her with a blanket after she had died. The judge said Pinsky previously expressed remorse, saying, quote, "I regret what I did, but that's what happened." According to Pinsky, his mother's physical and mental health went downhill after she lost her job, and he was the only caregiver, describing her treatment of him as like a slave.
The facts of this case are very tragic, and her death was unjustified. But considering all the circumstances, in particular Mr. Pinsky's lack of prior criminal record and his personal circumstances, as well as his very early acceptance of responsibility, we would suggest that this is the fit and proper sentence.
Defense lawyer Brian Bailey said Pinsky gave a full account of what he did and pled guilty at the earliest chance.
I can only tell you that from my experience, that's quite uncommon.
The judge called the domestic attack explosive, bizarre, and cruel, but he noted that it was out of character for Pinsky, and while savage, it was spontaneous. The judge accepted the joint recommendation of 10 years before being eligible to apply for parole, but Pinsky will get credit for time served.
That's what he expected to receive, and he felt it was justified.
The judge said Pinsky may never be released, but that will be up to the Parole Board of Canada. Callum Smith, CTV News, Halifax.
A Nova Scotia RCMP officer has been charged with sexual assault following an investigation by the Serious Incident Response Team. This stems from an alleged incident in 2023 involving a woman who was known to Constable William McNutt. The charge was laid on June 30th, and McNutt is set to face a judge tomorrow, July 3rd. He's been suspended without pay since January of last year over separate allegations. RCMP leadership calls the charge distressing and alarming. And on the web right now, Halifax police seized guns and drugs from a man who fell asleep at the wheel of his car. The details are up now at ctvnewsatlantic.ca. It was celebrated at the time as a new day for travel between Sydney and Halifax, but just months later, Quebec airline Pascan Aviation has announced it's ending its route between the Nova Scotia cities. CTV's Ryan McDonald now on what it might mean for passengers and the future of Cape Breton's main airport.
Less than 9 months after its first flight between Sydney and Halifax, Pascan Aviation is pulling up wheels from the McCurdy-Sydney Airport.
I found out today that Pascan's canceling the flight, so after this interview, I've got to get on the phone to try and rebook those flights.
John Patterson had a trip to Toronto with his wife and 2 sons booked for next month. Now he has to try and find new tickets through a different airline.
Hopefully, I'll be able to book through Air Canada to get back, because we don't want to have to drive to Halifax and add 4 hours up, 4 hours back, especially with the kids.
It is concerning, but again, I do know that they're doing some really good work out there.
The head of the Cape Breton Regional Chamber of Commerce is hopeful the Sydney airport might be able to attract a new airline or route to fill the void. She says she heard some concerns about the prices of the Pascan flights, but figures ultimately there might not have been the demand that people have been counting on for the flights to and from the provincial capital.
Things have changed over the last number of years, even in terms of people traveling less for work from Sydney to Halifax. A lot more work is done remotely now.
In an email, Pascan said that despite best efforts, passenger volumes remained below the levels required to support continued operations between the two Nova Scotia cities. In a statement of its own, the Sydney Airport Authority said while they are disappointed with Pascan's decision, they are still seeing a steady increase in passenger traffic from Sydney in general and continue to work with airline partners towards improved connectivity. As for what Patterson thinks Pascan pulling out might mean for the airport's future,
WestJet's now flying direct to Calgary. Hopefully that takes off. Pardon the pun. I think that they'll be all right.
Pascan says anyone with flights booked beyond July 20th, the date that it's ceasing operations in Sydney, will be entitled to a refund. Ryan McDonald, CTV News, Sydney.
It is a cooker out there. Of course, you know that if you've stepped outside today. Much of the Maritimes is under a heat warning, and while the mercury in some places reads 30 degrees, humidity has it feeling like 37. CTV's Nick Moore has more.
By mid-morning, the temperature had hit the mid-20s in St. Stephen. By mid-afternoon, the humidex was approaching 37 degrees Celsius.
Sweating a lot, and I wish it was cooler, obviously.
How are you dealing with the heat?
I went into the splash pad.
Local outdoor pools and splash pads are now open, helping to bring some relief to this early summer heat.
We have a couple of days of warm weather ahead of us, particularly for southern New Brunswick, PEI, and western and northern Nova Scotia. We saw our first heat warnings go out on Canada Day for parts of Nova Scotia.
Heat warnings were issued in Prince Edward Island and southern New Brunswick this morning.
Certainly, we're going to see these hot temperatures again tomorrow on Thursday.
Meteorologist Ian Hubbard says this heat warning will barely meet the two-day criteria for a warning. It was about 10 degrees cooler in downtown St. Andrews during the noon hour today, compared to St. Stephen about 20 minutes away. Lynn Legier was in town for the first time, escaping the heat warning in Moncton.
Well, in Moncton, it's pretty brutal right now, but here there's nice breeze.
For areas under a heat warning tonight, normal temperatures are expected to return late Thursday. Nick Moore, CTV News, St. Stephen.
And there's a live look at one of those communities under the heat warning. That is Charlottetown, of course, where it's currently 26 degrees at 6:07. Let's bring in Brienne Foley, who is in the Weather Center. And boy, that really stays up for a lot of communities and dealing with that mugginess.
Yes, and we're going to continue to see it, like Nick said in his report, overnight and into tomorrow. As we take a look right now at our radar and satellite, a little bit of extra cloud cover coming through, and we have a little bit of a system coming through in western parts of Nova Scotia, so some rain in those areas. But this is the big news. This is what Nick was talking about. So today into Thursday, we are continuing to see this heat warning in effect again through central parts of New Brunswick, as well as into the Annapolis Valley, northern parts of Nova Scotia, as well as Cape Breton Island, and of course into Prince Edward Island as well. So those high humidex values are going to continue as well tomorrow. We should see temperatures hovering around that 29-degree mark, but feeling more along the lines of 36. So again, if you do get out and about tomorrow, make sure you are taking those extra precautions. And as we take a look here at the current temperatures, yes, you're not getting a whole lot of reprieve overnight as well, as that heat warning remains in effect throughout the course of tonight. 6 o'clock, we're still at 30 degrees in St. Stephen and Moncton, 31 degrees in Miramichi. So with the humidex values, again, feeling warmer than what even those numbers are saying. So make sure you are staying hydrated and getting out of the sun if you can. Not a whole lot of reprieve from the winds coming through either. We are seeing a little bit of an increase in gusting winds in the Woodstock area and up in northern parts of New Brunswick, as well as over into Cape Breton, but not a whole lot of wind reprieve. Tom.
All right, thanks, Brienne. We'll see you for the full forecast in about 15 minutes. Now, staying cool and safe in the heat can be a challenge for some in our communities, with necessities like sunscreen, hats, even water bottles being out of reach. CTV's Emma Convey looks at how some community groups are stepping up to help.
Today is just like any other day at summer camp for the kids at the Boys and Girls Club, running around outside and playing games with their friends.
Swimming, canoeing, all the 9 yards. We love being outside, anything to do outside. We love that type of programming.
But with those hours spent outdoors, sudden heat protection is key.
We service almost 400 kids per week in the summer in our 8-week summer camp program. So as you can see, we would need a lot of help.
Hats, reusable water bottles, and sunscreen. Just a few items this team needs each summer. By the end of the 2 months, they give out hundreds. And they're asking for donations from the public.
We need these items every summer. As you can imagine, we go through a lot with new faces each day, each week. Everything changes a lot.
An ongoing need here and at other groups like Out of the Cold, which these days is worried about the heat. They provide adults with supportive housing and are also calling on the public's help to protect their clients from the heat.
Sunscreen is super important, and it's actually really something that is pretty unaffordable for us, and I think for a lot of folks. We've been struggling to get that for our folks.
They give out hygiene bags to those in need, but sunscreen is one item they've been short on this summer.
When our folks are out and about, they have less access to a lot of things than other folks in the community do, so it is really important. Substance users, folks that use alcohol also, they're more susceptible to the heat for sure.
And of course, Todd, these aren't luxury items. They are necessary for safety. And these groups are asking anyone that is able to donate hats or water bottles that they do drop off new ones. But of course, people can donate financially online as well. Todd.
And sunscreen is certainly expensive. Emma, what's it like out there now?
Honestly, it's pretty hot and humid. You can see softball taking place behind me, and I'm sure they're loaded with sunscreen and probably have lots of water, which will be needed right now, Todd.
Yeah, no doubt. Emma Convey on Halifax Commons this evening for us. Thank you. A busy intersection in St. John is set for significant upgrades, and now we know what the revamped Sims Corner could look like. As CTV's Avery McRae tells us, the plans are being met with, well, mixed reaction.
Redeveloping this busy west side intersection has been thrown around for decades. New renderings obtained by CTV suggest the long-bantered idea could soon become a reality.
When I saw the plan on it, I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. You're going to do a 2-year build for something that can be satisfied with a rotary.
Blaine Harris has worked just up the street from Sims Corner for years. He was sent the renderings by someone in the province's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure who would lead the project. A redesign would separate Main Street and Lancaster Avenue and would see a large overpass built to allow for little disruptions to the area's growing train traffic.
The trains are an issue that can be cured. You're running right now a 2-mile-long train. You can cut that down to a mile out of the port and run multiples throughout the day at varying times, low peak times. But to build this kind of an infrastructure solely to get around the train tracks, in my opinion, is crazy.
While no timeline for any work has been shared publicly, Harris says he was told the redesign would cost upwards of $100 million. While he disagrees with an overpass, others see it differently.
I like it for a couple of reasons.
Engineer Daniel Houghton says the overpass would remove any conflict between trains, vehicles, and pedestrian traffic and could be the best option.
The constructability's got to be heavily considered. It's a dangerous intersection. You know, from the respect of the conflicts between pedestrian and vehicle and trains already, adding in construction confusion to that has got to be considered.
In March, the province committed to redeveloping Sims Corner. Both the City of St. John and J.D. Irving directed all requests for comment on the proposed changes to the province. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure did not reply to multiple requests for further information or an interview. Avery McRae, CTV News, St. John.
We're going to stay on the transportation theme here for our next story. And people on Prince Edward Island are eager to see a federal election campaign promise fulfilled, a drop in tolls at the Confederation Bridge. But as CTV's Maria Sarub reports, with no firm timeline, frustration is growing.
Every time a car crosses the Confederation Bridge, the driver pays $50 and some change. That's despite a campaign promise from the Prime Minister to cut the toll to $20. So far, the cost hasn't budged, and some are starting to lose faith.
Not going to happen. That was just an election promise, in my opinion.
I'll believe it when I see it.
It's typical politicians' promises.
you never hear the truth.
It's the only road to and from the island, and for some tourists, the toll is a small price to pay to see PEI.
I think, to be honest, it's fair enough.
It's beautiful over here. We're staying on a little farm. It's so nice.
But trailers or commercial trucks pay even more, and for big businesses here and across the East Coast, it adds up.
There are probably 40 or 50 trucks a day for the same company going back and forth. It's a lot.
Nearly 1 million vehicles cross the Confederation Bridge annually, and business leaders say every truckload of supplies drives up the cost of doing business on the island.
The province's potato industry is one of the hardest hit, with up to $7 million in toll-related costs. And small and medium-sized businesses could be more competitive if the tolls are cut. That's according to the Greater Summerside Chamber of Commerce.
Get people looking out there and starting to choose the Atlantic option opposed to the Amazon option.
CTV News reached out to the Prime Minister's office for comment on his commitment to cutting bridge tolls and ferry prices, but didn't get a response by our deadline. PEI's premier called the issue a trade barrier, and local politicians pushed for the drop to be done by Canada Day. Egmont MP Robert Morrissey was one of them.
I have every confidence that the Prime Minister will deliver on the commitment that he made on behalf of us. I'm in contact with his office on a regular basis. In fact, I spoke to them yesterday.
Morrissey says the bridge is federally owned but operated by a private group, so lowering the toll means negotiations. He hopes for movement by the end of the summer, but for now, any movement here comes at full price. Maria Saru, CTV News, Borden-Carleton.
This was a cleanup day after a fire in Lower Sackville overnight. Emergency crews were on the scene of a house fire. Firefighters were called to the home on Smoky Drive. It's happened just before midnight. Flames were on the outside of the house. It got into the attic. Firefighters worked to contain the fire, but the hose was extensively damaged. The home was mostly destroyed. Everyone got out safely without injury. The cause remains under investigation.
Get the Maritime's top stories, breaking news alerts, and watch live. Download the CTV News app.
Are you looking for coastal property in Nova Scotia? Now, if so, you're entitled to know whether it's been damaged by flooding, storm surge, or erosion. Under new regulations, sellers are required to provide that information. Details now from CTV's Hafsa Arif.
Living by the ocean has its perks, stunning views, salty air, and peaceful mornings. But it also comes with risks, which buyers can now ask about before making their investment.
The changes to the property disclosure statements include 2 questions that allow sellers and buyers to consider if a property has been impacted by coastal flooding or coastal erosion.
It's part of the province's coastal protection strategy. In Nova Scotia, coastal properties make up a lot of the real estate sold. Realtors believe it's a logical and unsurprising step.
It's a combination of people becoming more sensitive to environmental impacts, and also just the fact that we've had a big influx of people from outside of the province that maybe aren't as familiar with coastal living.
In most cases, realtors say buyers are informed, but that doesn't mean it won't make things tougher for some sellers.
I can imagine a scenario whereby there's a seller that's going to have an issue now that didn't come up when they purchased. Unfortunately, that's just the changing nature of, well, the coastline itself.
The province doesn't believe this will be too big of a problem.
The navigators who are available for all Nova Scotians, and if you were selling a piece of property or potentially buying a piece of property, you could contact them and get more information about potential action that could be taken on that piece of property.
But the opposition wants the province to go further, pointing to the government's decision to scrap the Coastal Protection Act.
It's insufficient. We live in a largely coastal province, and we live in an era of climate change, and sea levels are rising, and it creates a real hazard for property owners and for communities.
For many, buying coastal property is a lifelong dream, and now they can better weigh the risks before making it their reality. Hafsa Arif, CTV News, Halifax.
Time for a break. On the other side, Brienne has more steamy weather details. Katie Kelly on a sought-after maritime instrument. But first, celebrating citizenship.
I'm really so happy. It's amazing that I'm finally a Canadian citizen.
We'll hear from new Canadians about what it's like to take the oath on Canada Day. That's coming up. A group of people are spending their first full day as Canadian citizens. They were part of a citizenship ceremony in Halifax on Canada Day. As CTV's Vanessa Wright tells us, Canada's newest citizens reflected on what it took to get to that moment.
On a day dedicated to Canadian pride, a group of new Canadians are joining in on the celebrations.
Whether you arrived just a few years ago or decades ago, starting today, you're part of shaping the next chapter of that story.
51 people from 18 different countries took part in a citizenship ceremony held at the Canadian Museum of Immigration in Halifax. Together, they took an oath, officially making them Canada's newest citizens.
You've chosen Canada, and today I'm delighted to say that Canada is voting in favor of you.
It's really emotional for me. I'm really so happy. It's amazing that I'm finally a Canadian citizen. I feel that all my hard work has been paid.
With some deciding to settle in Nova Scotia.
Well, for those of you that are choosing to stay in Halifax, a special thank you for choosing Halifax. We are better because you are here.
This family, who lived in Denmark, has now settled in Tantallon, Nova Scotia.
We're very proud to be Canadian now, and it's nice to have roots and a place. I've lived as kind of guest or visitor in country for about 20 years in different countries, so it's quite meaningful to have roots and know that we're planning to stay here.
And for many in attendance, the gravity and responsibility of being Canadian could be felt.
We have the important right to vote, and of course you gain this right today, and I hope you will take advantage of it at your first opportunity.
Many spent the day with family and friends while reflecting on their journey to this point.
Whether you came looking for economic opportunities, to reunite with family, or fleeing conflict, you have worked hard and shown resilient to reach the moment.
One they'll never forget. Vanessa Wright, CTV News, Halifax.
It's been a muggy day. How long are we going to sweat it out? Brianne Foley has the answer. She'll offer up the details in the full forecast right after this. Still fairly busy at the Armdale Rotary in the west end of Halifax. You see the arm, the very tip of the arm there. Traffic still moving. Blue skies still ahead. And air conditioning in all those cars, I hope.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, well, they're going to try and drive a little faster to get some wind blowing through because it's still muggy out there.
Yeah, it is muggy, right?
Yeah.
But it's not going to last indefinitely.
Not indefinitely.
We know there's an end.
There is an end. Later tomorrow.
Later tomorrow.
But tonight, not a whole lot of reprieve.
Boy, they could use some cooler weather out in British Columbia, in particular, up in Lytton.
Yes. British Columbia, over in parts of Alberta, as well as Saskatchewan and into Manitoba. We're seeing extreme heat warnings across all three of those provinces, as well as into a little bit of northern Ontario. But again, those hot temperatures still settling into places like Toronto as well. And then we are seeing some thunderstorms over in the Ottawa area. A severe thunderstorm watch is in effect there, and that's going to impact into our region a little bit later. But speaking of our region, yes, that heat warning still in effect for today and into Thursday in most of central New Brunswick, as well as along that western coast. We're seeing it blanketing Prince Edward Island, as well as into Cape Breton Island, northern parts of Nova Scotia and the Annapolis Valley. So again, overnight, we're not going to see low temperatures giving that reprieve of the heat. We're going to continue to see higher humidex values as well. So Into tomorrow, we're going to see those humidex values in the mid-30s. Even though the temperatures are going to be around that 29-degree mark, we are going to see warmer temperatures continuing. As we can see, 6 o'clock, not a whole lot of reprieve in cooler temperatures. We're seeing a little bit more over in the Yarmouth and Shelburne areas. Of course, there's a little bit of a system coming through there, low-pressure system bringing some cooler temperatures with the rain coming through. And then along the coastline, we are seeing some cooler temperatures as well, but not a whole lot of reprieve in the middle of the Maritimes. So that's going to continue. That humidex value, again, still impacting what it's actually feeling like outside. So although it says it's 24 in Halifax, it's feeling more along the lines of 32. You can really feel that mugginess in the air, especially throughout Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. A little less humid up in parts of New Brunswick, and then as we can see, that relative humidity really just like settling in the Nova Scotia area. So as we take a look overnight, we are going to see some cloudy conditions coming through. We're also going to see some thunder showers. So we could continue to see a risk of thunderstorms tomorrow as a low pressure system comes in, and with that heat warning still in effect, of course, perfect storm for thunderstorms. Into the southern portion of New Brunswick, again, those hotter temperatures, except along that Bay of Fundy coastline, we'll see some fog rolling through as well. Onto Prince Edward Island, much of the same, a chance of afternoon showers, most likely evening, and nighttime showers for PEI, as well as over into parts of Cape Breton Island. And then we still continue to see that heat warning in effect in northern parts of Nova Scotia, as well as into the Annapolis Valley. A little bit cooler conditions in western parts of Nova Scotia, but still well above seasonal for this time of year. Watching our rain forecast, we are going to see a little bit of a system coming through later into the afternoon tomorrow. So that's really when we're going to see that impacting that afternoon, evening into most of New Brunswick, and then that's going to push east into parts of Prince Edward Island and Cape Breton Island. Into Thursday, we are going to continue to see some showers remaining. Again, a lot of fog in the morning, but we are going to see a little bit of a reprieve of temperatures as we head later into the day. Again, the most amount of rainfall is going to be over in that western part of New Brunswick. So heading into the weekend, we are seeing sunnier skies, and that's pretty much going to be the theme across the Maritimes. We're going to continue to see those sunnier skies into Nova Scotia. Again, above seasonal temperatures, still feeling pretty warm overnight, and that's going to be the same into Prince Edward Island, although a little bit more rainfall in their forecast, especially into Friday, where we're continuing to see that low pressure system push in. But then as we head into the weekend, we should see mostly sunny skies. So a couple more days of heat, a little bit of a reprieve, but then nice weekend.
What a difference. The Halifax area in the morning, it looked and felt like it was going to rain for 3 days straight.
Yep.
And then boom, all of a sudden we're into the sun and the heat.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Brianne. We'll check in with you towards the end of the show. Coming up next, we'll talk about changes to the political landscape in New Brunswick, and then strumming a sweet tune on the scene.
Hi, I'm Arnold Linden, and I build custom guitars here in my shop in Mahone Bay. I'm holding a guitar that Ryan Peake played at the Nickelback concert on Friday. I'm going to tell you more about it coming up.
Mornings with Aaron and Peter.
Move family, make time to spend every morning with us from 5:30 to 10.
We promise to start your day with a smile and feeling great about what's ahead.
Welcome back. Typically, it's a slow time in provincial politics. Politicians are in summer recess, of course, but a couple of moves have, well, shifted the landscape somewhat in New Brunswick. Here to walk us through what they could mean is UNB political scientist J.P. Lewis, and he is in St. John. Nice to see you, J.P.
Nice to see you, Todd.
Adam Harris of the Telegraph-Journal reporting that the People's Alliance Party is officially no more. It is deregistering as a political party. Was that expected? Was that inevitable?
Not a surprise at this point, but does kind of tie a bow on, you know, quite a run for a smaller party, and for a party that was, you know, started as a project as one individual, one politician, which we've seen before in Canadian politics. I think the Reform Party and Preston Manning is one of the best precedents. But I mean, what Chris Austin was able to do to win seats with a brand new party breaking through in 2018. I mean, that's difficult, and then to have influence on the government, and then obviously he would cross the floor and enter the government himself. But I mean, it does speak to a time in New Brunswick politics where there was a disruption of our party system, and also, you know, some of the issues that the People's Alliance were able to kind of ride to success for a few seats. And then I would argue, you know, really punch above their weight in terms of how small their caucus was in terms of the imprint that they had.
So where do the parties, albeit small, but loyal supporters go?
I think they've gradually, you know, trailed off. We've seen popular support go down as it's been more difficult for the party to, you know, to attract candidates. And then if you're not running candidates, obviously people can't vote for the party. I think that this is obviously all tied into Austin leaving the party and joining the Tories. And then, of course, that's, you know, part of what most observers think was a turn to the right for the Tories under Blaine Higgs. So I'd imagine, you know, a fair number of folks who were maybe voting People's Alliance would end up voting Progressive Conservative. Yeah. You know, in 2020 and 2024, and you know, Chris Austin was able to hold on to his seat, so that's one like clear indication of that. You know, people who are excited about the People's Alliance were able to find another home.
Would you put them in the same category as a Confederation of Regions party for those of us with long memories?
Yeah, I mean that would be the best comparable. And again, I think the one thing with the Confederation of Regions that separates it from the People's Alliance was the Progressive Conservative was in such an existential crisis at the time. Leading up to 1991, they lost all their seats. So there was much more of an opening of an alternative to the right, where Austin was, you know, had run for the nomination of a local candidacy for the Progressive Conservatives, hadn't won it, and then you know, found this new political project. In terms of their legacies in New Brunswick politics, I'd say, you know, anti-francophone bilingual sentiment is the legacies of both, and you know, how much does it have to kind of bubble up to become a political party again?
Okay, well, that dovetails nicely into the second thing that's happened of late, and that is the Progressive Conservative Party has launched its first official languages committee to attract francophones to the party. Did it have a choice?
Well, I mean, this is, speaking of existential crisis, I don't know if it's an existential crisis, but it's an existential moment for the Progressive Conservatives. You know, I think a lot of people, including those who were in the party, in the caucus, in the cabinet, saw the party drifting too far to the right. And I think we kind of bundled that up with not being able to have outreach to francophone voters to northern ridings. So as they lead up to selecting their next leader, figuring out what the party priorities are going to be going into the next provincial election, you know, this type of endeavor is not surprising. You know, when the Progressive Conservative Party has had success in the past, they've figured out a way to win some northern ridings, whether it was under David Allward or Bernard Lord, or even going back to Richard Hatfield. So this outreach needs to be part of their, not just in an altruistic sense, but in a strategic sense.
Sure.
Needs to be part of their, you know, next steps of finding a way back to government.
You leave a lot of votes on the sidelines if you don't do that. So, you know, put both of these together. Is the landscape such that the province is shifting back towards the center, if it was there before?
I would argue we're still in a bit of a Holt honeymoon, also in a moment of, you know, dealing with the, you know, American trade policies, that I wouldn't look at any snapshot of polls or what's going on now and consider that where the province is headed. I think, I mean, not as much of a crisis, but, you know, when you think about how politics as usual froze during 2020, during the first couple of years of COVID, and I think we're in a similar spot now, and we will see politics slowly getting back to normal, and then we can assess, you know, where are New Brunswick politics shifting. Right. And one of the big keys of that, understanding that, will be where is the Progressive Conservative Party shifting? What type of leader do they select? What type of things do they focus on? in moving forward.
Well, it will be interesting, and we know you're watching, and we appreciate you taking the time to offer us your insight. We'll be talking again.
Thanks a lot, Todd.
All right, JP Lewis in St. John. We'll take a break. We'll be back with much more of your show after this. In our first edition of the Lifeline of July, there are reasons to avoid that double-double. I'm talking to you, Katie Kelly. A new study finds people who drink black coffee, may live longer. That story and more from Suzette Beliveau.
There have been several recent studies that have found ultra-processed foods are bad for our health. But a new Harvard study suggests that these types of food dominate the grocery aisles of many stores in North America. The study, published in the journal Nature, finds that processed foods like ramen, noodles, canned soups, packaged side dishes, crackers, and chips are high in fat, salt, and sugar, and additives, but low in nutrition. Often these foods are stocked in shops because they are shelf-stable and do not need refrigeration. Researchers say head to the edges of the grocery store to shop for fresh produce, unsweetened dairy, and lean meats. Also aim to cook at home more often rather than eating out. Experts say eating too much ultra-processed food can increase your risk of cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. The next time you pour yourself a cup of coffee, you might want to consider holding the cream and sugar. A new study suggests taking your coffee black could help you live longer. Researchers at Tufts University looked at more than 46,000 U.S. adults over a 10-year period and found that coffee drinkers who put little or no sugar and cream in their coffee had a lower risk of death from cardiovascular disease. In fact, drinking black coffee was associated with a 14% lower risk of all-cause mortality as compared to no coffee consumption. The Nova Scotia Life-Saving Society says it's important to keep safety top of mind when cooling off and having fun by the water this summer.
Staying close to your kids, things can happen very quickly, but in a larger sense, we want to swim in places where we're familiar with the water, the currents, the tides.
Michael Melanchuk says bodies of water change day by day. Be very cautious and respect nature. Find a supervised setting, such as a provincial park or public outdoor pool. Always bring sunscreen and don't forget to stay hydrated. With health and medical news, I'm Suzette Beliveau for the Lifeline.
On the scene with Katie Kelly, you're over the coffee thing?
I'm over it now.
Okay. A local woodworker is living out his rock and roll fantasy right here in the Maritimes.
Yes, he sure is, Todd. Watching years of hard work come to life in front of a massive crowd.
I gotta thank Arnold for that. It's a fantastic guitar.
It's a dream come true for Arnold London.
I built a guitar for Ryan Peake, the Nickelback lead guitar player.
With the help of a friend, one of his custom-made guitars was played in front of thousands at the Nickelback concert in Halifax.
I use the red spruce, and I use rock maple, I use black locust, tamarack.
London is a master craftsman, carving out a life that's been rooted in wood for more than 5 decades.
Ever since I took wood in grade 7 shop, I've been working with wood.
He ran sawmills and a retail lumber business, but in retirement, he's pouring all of his time and talent into his true passion, guitars.
I love the way they look, I love the way they sound, and I love putting different woods together to get different sounds.
Each instrument is handcrafted using woods sourced right here in the Maritimes, much of it with special meaning.
I built guitars from beams from old barns. I built a guitar from beams that come out of the old sugar refinery in St. John when they tore it down. I'm building a guitar right now that came from Keddy's Landing sawmill from just down the road that was current 1820s.
He's even turned reclaimed wood from Oak Island's money pit into musical treasures.
The wood I use for those guitars comes up from underground, some of it over 100 feet.
It's a painstaking process. Each guitar is about 200 hours of meticulous work.
I built every piece, including the rosettes and all the bracing, linings, all that is built by hand, the bridge.
From his small shop in Mahone Bay to the hands of a rock star, London proves that with passion and patience, you can craft music that lasts a lifetime.
Yeah, I know it's a pretty large feather in my cap, and 50 years in the making.
You don't even need to play them. Just hang them on the wall. They're art.
They're art. They are gorgeous. And the love and the care that he puts into every individual one. I stood there. I could have been in his shop for hours just looking around. And even he had walls lined with, like, I think he said 40 or 50 different kinds of wood. He was listing different types of wood. There are so many, and so many that I've never even heard of. But it was really cool to see his guitar after meeting him on stage at Nickelback on Friday night. They play. It was Rockstar, the song Rock. So it's like the huge song, and to see the guitar on stage for that, so cool.
It's really interesting how the bands come to town and they do a nod to something local. We had that with Nickelback, and then with the Killers, they opened up with a little bit of Underwhelmed by Sloan.
By Sloan,
Just
I heard.
a nod, right?
So awesome. And also, while this guitar was on stage, Todd, just so you know, so were the Trailer Park Boys.
Of course they were. Thank you.
You're
we'll see you
welcome.
tomorrow night. We'll be back after this. In our market report, the Dow ended the day basically flat. It was down a few points. But shares of Bombardier are taking off. BNN Bloomberg's Marilla Fernandez tells us why.
Shares shot up more than 20% after the deal was made public, making Bombardier the biggest mover on the TSX today. Bombardier stock was boosted by a new order for 50 of its Challenger and Global jets. The deal includes servicing the aircraft, making it worth $1.7 million U.S. The Canadian jet maker isn't identifying the first-time buyer. Microsoft is laying off about 9,000 employees. It's the second massive cut in months. The company says it's trying to streamline. The technology firm, like many of its peers, is investing deeply in artificial intelligence, and layoffs could be an attempt to cut costs. Del Monte, the canned fruit and vegetable company, is seeking bankruptcy protection. The company is carrying about $1.2 billion of debt. Del Monte has been around for 138 years, but says demand for its products has been dropping as consumers look for healthier or cheaper options. The major North American markets had record closes again today, but let's start with the Canadian dollar. It's up, hitting 73.61. West Texas Intermediate is up close to $2 to 67.38. Our fix on Western Canadian Select has it down to 53.44. And the TSX only moved 12 points, but it was another record close, finishing the trading day at 26,869. Those are your business headlines. I'm Marilla Fernandez.
Let's get a final look at the forecast. Brianne is outside on the weather deck. Looks pleasant.
It is pleasant, and there's even a little bit of a breeze, Todd. So we're actually feeling a little bit cooler, not so muggy as we head out into the evening. Now, we aren't going to see a whole lot of a reprieve overnight as we still have a heat warning in effect for many areas throughout the Maritimes. But as we start the day tomorrow, we'll have some cloudy conditions, and we will see some fog, especially along the Bay of Fundy coastline, as well as the Nova Scotia coastline. So we are going to see a little bit of fog before we switch into a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon. Could see some showers in the late afternoon, even some thunderstorms as well for some areas, especially up in New Brunswick. So that heat warning expected to stay in effect until a little bit later into Thursday afternoon before things finally cool down a little bit. But again, those Humidex values are going to be up there again tomorrow, Todd.
Okay, that's, well, we'll dress accordingly, won't we?
We will.
Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night, Brianne. Coming up tomorrow at 6, patrolling the province. Murphy's Logic looks at Nova Scotia's plan to enhance rural policing with fewer municipal forces and more RCMP, extending the long arm of the law. We'll have Steve's thoughts on this tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And finally, for us tonight, you ever feel like your whole day can go sideways if your morning routine doesn't go according to plan? Well, if you said yes, you are not alone. A new poll from Talker Research found that people can be easily thrown off by missing a key part of their morning routine. Some of those missteps include forgetting to make coffee, forgetting to have your coffee or tea, forgetting to brush your teeth, not having enough water, not having breakfast. The list goes on and on. So you want to stick to that routine to have the rest of your day go accordingly. That's our look at the day. We will be back here with Jesse Thomas, the late update at at 11:30. We will replay this in a moment over on CTV 2. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow at 6. Good night.
CTV News, the Maritime's #1 newscast.